Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and welcome to part 3 of our exploration of Asian horror films released in 2013. Now this is the middle part of this video, which means that I will be reviewing some pretty good stuff today, in my opinion. The 9 titles that we will be discussing this evening are spread over 5 different countries, so we're going to do some globe-trotting again. And as always, titles for all the movies I discuss will be listed in the description box below. So let's get started tonight. And our first film is called Doctor, a South Korean horror film from 2013, of course. Now this film had a film festival date of 2012, but got a wide theatrical release in Korea in 2013, meaning that in some places you may see it listed as a 2012 film. Now this is about a demented plastic surgeon who becomes agitated by his wife and his acquaintances. Now you can tell that there's a screw loose in this guy right from the opening scene of this movie. He berates his beautiful wife for minor events, like a slight mannerism or her choice of tie for him to wear for the day. However, his wife isn't exactly the most loyal person anyways, since she is having an affair with another man. She also has some ulterior motives for marrying this guy. So things go from bad to worse for our main character, who is the antagonist. And given the fact that he's on the brink of completely losing his mind, you can bet that some bad stuff is going to happen. Now, if you're looking for a deep psychological study on vanity, look elsewhere, okay? The characters are rather simplistic in this film, but their interaction is what makes this film rather fun to watch, in my opinion. Now, there are a variety of reasons why I feel this way. Number 1, this film is properly paced and moves along quite briskly. Number 2, the antagonist, as I mentioned before, is the main character, which I always like to see. Number 3, the antagonist is surprisingly timid and cowardly early on in the film, and he fails to take the opportunity to murder at some points, which is, quite surprising, I think. Number 4, it's very difficult to know when and how each supporting character is going to be murdered by this bad guy, if at all, which I liked. 5, there's a little bit of bloody violence on display, including a macabre breast implant scene. So if you're a fan of medical horror films, this could be one to check out for you. And number 6, the characters mostly avoid boneheaded decisions. Mostly. Now, there's also an interesting aspect involving the doctor's good-natured assistants in his plastic surgery clinic, who must scramble and deal with this guy's erratic behavior with patients. Because he doesn't just try to kill everybody right from the start. At work especially, he's just kind of an oddball, and he gradually starts losing things, and his fellow acquaintances, the nurses on duty, start to really have to deal with his weird decisions, and they gradually become more extreme throughout the film. So I like that aspect quite a bit as well. There's definitely some suspense that is earned here in addition, but as I inferred earlier, this is more of a popcorn flick, and I was entertained while watching it. So I do like Doctor, and I recommend it. Now, Doctor it has limited availability on DVD, and you can't find it on some legitimate streaming sites like Cineflix. Alright. Now, in 2013, one of our favorite directors, or at least one of my favorite directors, Koji Shiraishi, directed 4 horror films in this year alone, and I will be covering all of them in this playlist. 3 of these movies are very low-budget, direct-to-video films in a franchise that we've been covering. Again, the big hurdle for enjoying these particular films is the lack of subtitles, which means that you'll need to sit through some stretches of dialogue and interviews along the way. So check out my previous video where I discuss why I enjoy these films despite their lack of subtitles. Now, sometimes I think that maybe I should skip these movies while preparing this playlist, because virtually no one, practically, is going to blind buy these Japanese DVDs without subtitles available for them. And Japanese DVDs are they're more expensive than American DVDs. But I do think that it's important to document what kinds of movies that Japan was producing in this horror playlist, You know what I mean? Because you want to know what's going on in the industry, and that's one of the main reasons I have this playlist. So even if you're not really interested in blind buying some of these films, I think it should be important to cover them regardless. So at the very least, my thoughts on this franchise will serve as a form of documentation on industry trends, which is, again, one of the main reasons why I started this playlist to begin with. So let's take a look at two of Shiraishi's films back-to-back in the same franchise. We have Senritsu Kaiki File, Kowasugi File 3, also known as Hitokui Kappa Densetsu, and this is a documentary-style horror film, as well as Senritsu Kaiki File, Kowasugi File 5, also known as Shinsetsu Yotsuya Kaidan, Oiwa no Noroi. And that's a mouthful for you. So in these two films, Koji Shiraishi continues his obsession with both documentary-style horror and Japanese urban legends in these films. Now, File 3, okay, is about a group of journalists who investigate a sighting of the legendary Kappa yokai monster, and they attempt to capture it. Now, at the beginning of the film, we are shown a video involving a romantic couple who are hanging out near a pond in a forest. They catch a glimpse of a kappa swimming in the water. So obviously our protagonists from the prior installments see this footage and go on to investigate, and things get pretty entertaining from there. So the kappa is a yokai monster that is more well known for its silliness and stinkiness over its ability to provoke fear. I think most of the time when people think of kappa, they think of, they kind of laugh, they giggle. Because it's usually known for being very stinky. It smells. And, usually farts a lot, I think. And I think you can ward away kappa with your own farts, is what I've read about them. But, yeah, so... But this movie, with all that taken into consideration, this movie does a pretty good job of making the kappa rather creepy. They kind of morph its legendary status into a more creepy, version. And they supplement it with artistic renditions. Like, a lot of times when you see a kappa monster, it's usually portrayed in a cute kind of way, in an artistic rendition. In this case, in this movie, they show artistic renditions in, like, a creepy way. Like, it looks kind of nasty looking. So they do that, and then they supplement its scenes with, like, eerie scoring and the documentary-style format. So it does kind of make the kappa monster a little bit more intimidating here than how I've ever seen it before in illustrations. Now, one frustration that I had with this film is that you barely see the kappa during the video scenes, and they never really give you a good, clean shot of it. And I guess that makes sense to a degree because the kappa, as I said before, is known as a fairly silly character in folklore, but I still would have liked to see it more clearly at times. Sound effects are great, especially the kappa's blistering fast footsteps in the dark. Like, this sucker runs fast, and he's got a nasty uppercut. So that's how he rolls in this. And the final showdown between him and our main character, who's one of the journalists, is pretty unique and pretty entertaining. I found this movie to be interesting, and it does have a few surprises to enjoy. But again, it's a lower budget flick, and you kind of barely see the monster along the way, so those are kind of the negatives. There's definitely less horror sequences in this installment than in some of the other Senritsu Kaiki File installments as well, but I liked it. It's a good flick. Now, File 5 is about the Yotsuya Kaidan ghost that is manifesting itself in modern-day Tokyo. Now, at the beginning of this film, our two protagonists are watching some of the previous films in this franchise, which is kind of interesting, kind of a meta experience, and they discuss some of the crazy stuff that occurred in File 1, 2, 3, and 4. Something weird happens while they're watching their own files, like their own videos, and then they look at the video of a ghost sighting at a funeral, that somebody sends into them to help them investigate. Now, this film continues to make connections between the prior installments in this franchise, and this is something that I like about it. In terms of specific phenomena and how they're similar to what they previously encountered, it becomes clear that the seemingly unconnected events of this franchise do, in fact, have some kind of a connection to it. So is there something big about to happen that is bringing out like these ghosts, aliens, and yokai monsters? You know, you gotta keep watching to find out. Now, File 5 has some good background scares to it, and a loony exorcism sequence. There's also a brief alternate universe that is created with B-grade CGI that could perplex some viewers. You know, this director implemented a similar tactic in the post-credit sequence of his film Occult from 2009. So if you've seen that film and you saw the post-credit sequence in that film, you're familiar with the kind of oddball, cheap visuals that he likes to chuck in from time to time, for better or worse. Now, a lot of people have problems with these kinds of special effects in some of Shiraishi's films. I find their goofiness to be oddly watchable, though, for some unknown reason. I think because it's such a sharp contrast to the basic found footage format that he uses otherwise. I don't know, I find it amusing. And if you're wondering why I skipped File 4 in this video, it's because it will make an appearance in a future part of this video, because I think it's the best of this particular year in terms of these franchise installments. So, you know, these films, the Senritsu Kaiki File films, are available on Region 2 DVD without subtitles. Alright, now we move on here, and we stay in Japan. Not really globe hopping too much yet, but we will. And this film is called It's a Beautiful Day, also known as Kuso Subarashii Kono Sekai. Again, we're in Japan. Now, while visiting California, a group of international students consisting of one Korean girl and a handful of Japanese women and men take a road trip, hang out, drink, and party. You know, it's the kind of thing college kids do, right? Now, unfortunately for them, they are targeted by two homicidal burglars who erroneously believe that one of the girls witnessed the stashing of one of their victims' bodies. Now, the bad guys hunt our protagonists down and pick them off one at a time. Now, this begins with some beautiful natural environments, obviously, surprisingly. I like the way this film was shot. It must have had a very small budget. I can kind of tell given the, the format, but the cinematography is quite good. The Korean girl is played by Kkob-bi Kim, and this actress starred in Midnight Ballad for Ghost Theater, which I covered before, as well as some other stuff. She was also in The Liar, which I have a separate review of on my channel. Very good actress. She's also the lead in this film and proves to be the most likable character of the bunch. Since the Japanese students, again, quite surprisingly, are rather rude to her. They talk behind her back and make her pay more than her fair share of the travel costs. So, yeah, the Japanese characters in this are not too friendly. Now, since this is set in California, the villains consist of two Caucasian men, a timid younger brother and a mentally unhinged older brother. Now, their acting is not particularly great, but the older brother is threatening enough to make the film work. You know what I mean? He's definitely a threat to our protagonist, so that's good. Now, in terms of tone, this movie is a bit darker than I had expected. It really is. You know, the death scenes are surprisingly bloody and mean-spirited, with the primary weapon of choice being an axe, of all things, so that's good. Definitely an upgrade over something like Lost Harmony, which I reviewed in my video from 2011. You know, that movie suffered badly from a lack of good death scenes, and I'm happy to say that there's enough violence in It's a Beautiful Day to satisfy me. And that kind of thing is important for films such as this, as we all know. Now, there's a very weird event, okay, that occurs at one point that will leave most viewers scratching their heads, since it comes from out of nowhere. Comes out of left field. Now, I could definitely see some people not liking that aspect of the film, but it worked for me, precisely because it comes from out of nowhere. I liked it, and I think it added something memorable to the film. On the negative side, there is one kind of goofy foot chase sequence with some weird camera work that I did not really like. All of the scenes in this movie, that one definitely felt the most awkward. The ending is good, I think, and even a bit creepy, in my opinion. Now, my DVD version of It's a Beautiful Day did not have subtitles. However, most of the dialogue in this movie is English anyways. You know, watching this without subtitles will basically place you in the same situation as the Korean character because she doesn't really know what the Japanese characters are saying anyways. And whenever they communicate to each other, it's in English. So, and the villains speak English. So there's definitely enough English dialogue here to be able to watch this without subtitles if you could find it. So that's definitely a nice pointer I'm giving you there. So I like this one. I just rewatched it a few weeks ago, and I think it's a pretty cool little movie. It's kind of a slasher thriller film, and I liked it. So It's a Beautiful Day is available on Region 2 DVD with subtitles. Or without subtitles, sorry. Alright, it's globe hopping time. It's time to hop around here. Now our next film tonight, we now escape Japan, and we do some traveling. So let's go to Indonesia next. Let's do an Indonesian horror film. And this one is called Shackled, also known as Belenguu, a horror thriller film. Now this film had a film festival date, again in 2012, but a wide theatrical release in Korea in 2013, meaning that in some places you may see it listed as a 2012 film. So, you know, the website Variety actually provides a nice little plot synopsis that I'm going to borrow here. Running scared through the forest, long-haired 30-something Alang is picked up by Jinga, a sexy doll driving a vintage Mercedes-Benz. Now suddenly surrounded by corpses and a killer dressed in a rabbit suit, Alang wakes up to inform viewers in voiceover narration that Jinga is the key to all of the terrible things in this crazy town. A withdrawn figure who works in a scuzzy Jakarta bar and lives in a drab apartment block, Alang has eyes for neighbor Jenga, the mother of adorable Moppet Senja. You keeping track of all this? Now, upping the intrigue, Jenga's suspicious husband, Gunter, is revealed to be a knife thrower who dons a rabbit suit for his act in a vaudeville-like venue. So yeah, this one's a little weird. It's a little weird. It's a deliberately paced psychological film that avoids jump scares in favor of a moody, surrealistic tone. You know, if you've ever seen a David Lynch film or any weird, surrealistic projects from other directors, Shackled does feel similar to those kinds of films. It's got that kind of awkward, unreal vibe to it. And consequently, there are certainly some creepy scenes to enjoy. But I will say that it does avoid going off the deep end too much. You know, sometimes with those weird movies, they just go off the deep end so much that it just loses you. It's not the case here. It's not the case. It does not become completely meaningless in its, I guess, quirkiness, we'll put it that way. I mean, yeah, there are some interesting surprises along the way and weird moments, but in this case, they actually seem to make sense at the end of the film, which is not something you can always say in films like this. Performances are solid, and I like the direction overall. So why is this film only in part 3 of this video? You know, it's the type of film that I like. It's surrealistic, it's weird, it's interesting. Well, it's been a few years since I've seen this one last time, but if I remember correctly, it was very slow-paced. It definitely has a few pacing issues, I think. The notes in my records say that they use the term glacial, you know what I mean, to describe it. So that usually means that it's probably a little bit too slow for its own good. However, if I had the chance to watch it again, there's a chance that I would enjoy it even more during a second viewing. So I tend to react that way to films such as this. So I kind of wish I had the chance to rewatch it again before doing this video, but I did not. But overall, Shackled is a quality flick. You know, from what I told you, you should know if it's up your alley or not. If you like those weird, like, psychological horror thrillers, and hey, check this one out. It's certainly worth watching, and it's a good flick. Check out the trailer on YouTube. It'll give you an idea of what to expect from this one. Now, the availability of Shackled is that it is available on Region 2 DVD with subtitles. That's a UK release. Alright, now we hop again to mainland China. It's time to go back to mainland China. This is one I recently added to my collection, my DVD collection. And that is the Chrysalis. Alright. Now this is listed, again, as a 2012 release, this time on IMDb, but it has a 2013 release on Wikipedia, so, pick one, right? So the plot goes something like this. On February 14th, hairdresser Wen Xin, the illegitimate daughter of a Frenchman and a Chinese woman, is kidnapped by her best friend Annie, immobilized with muscle relaxants and held prisoner in a flat. Now, Wen Xin avoids a potential electrocution in a bathtub and escapes. Now, during their subsequent fight, Wen Xin is knocked unconscious and awakens 3 months later on the side of a road with no memory of her abduction. Now, she eventually discovers that the flat in which she was held prisoner is now empty, and Annie has disappeared. Now, Annie's father is a psychiatrist at a hospital, and he last confirms that he got a message from his daughter on February 14th. So, subsequently, Wen Xin begins to experience horrific visions and psychological episodes that mirror her abductor's persona. So you may need to exercise a little bit of patience with the Chrysalis. I do think you need a little patience for this one. During the opening half, this film is a little bit uneven in terms of pacing, which at times seems a bit too fast and loose for its own good, which could lead the viewer to think that the film is a bit sloppy early on. The reason for this is that the filmmakers try to create a very psychological and disorienting experience. A lot of handheld camera is used early on, as well as some rigid, frequent editing that helps to give that disorienting feel. The overall execution gets better, though, as it moves along, and the Chrysalis gets stronger and more entertaining as it progresses. This builds to a final half hour that is both exciting and thought-provoking, in my opinion. But despite its uneven opening half hour, the plot and the lead protagonist are good enough to hold interest, even during its weaker moments. There are some genuine surprises to be had in this. The lead actress is a Taiwanese woman named Sandrine Pina, who also starred in Yang Yang from 2009, which is worth watching, by the way, if you could find it. Production values in this are pretty darn good, I think. Looks very nice. Visuals and overall style are very pleasing. And this is especially true of the music, too. There's a certain theme for this movie that's introduced at the very beginning and end. It's quite impactful, I think. So yes, The Chrysalis is a fun watch. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And it is available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles. Alright, now we hop around again. We go back to South Korea. We began this video with South Korea with Doctor, and now we're back there for the next one. Now this movie I already covered on my channel in a separate individual movie review. I think it was during Halloween time last year that I covered it. And that is Horror Stories 2. This is a South Korean horror comedy anthology from 2013, of course. I actually reviewed all 3 of these films in this franchise in separate videos on my channel. So if you want a more detailed review of each of those installments, check out those videos. Horror Stories 2 is generally considered to be the slight step down from its predecessor, but there is quite a bit to enjoy here, I think. So let's briefly touch on each short film and see which ones are the best of the bunch. So the wraparound segment is called 444, also known as Beginning Story, and it's about a psychic who reviews 3 death files in the basement of an insurance company. Now this segment does a very interesting job of linking all of the rest of the stories in this anthology together in a natural, interesting way, because the case files that the characters are researching in this first segment are shown as separate short films throughout the rest of the anthology. So it was a cool idea. I liked how it kind of worked things together, and it was definitely interesting. You know how some anthologies just kind of throw together the different segments in like a, I don't know, I guess a lazy way. Usually it's just a few friends sitting around a fire telling ghost stories or something, and each ghost story is a segment, or somebody, happens upon a box of video recorded footage and they watch them, and each of the videos is like a different, but this one's a little different. They're researching case files in an insurance company archive. So that was pretty cool. The lead actress in this wraparound segment is Si-Young Lee, who previously starred in When I Turn 9, which I reviewed on my channel. Fantastic film, and I'm a big fan of this actress. So the first standalone story in this anthology is called Cliff. So you have two young men who fall from the top of a mountain cliff and land on a small ledge that's jetting out from the cliff with no way off. They only have one candy bar between the two of them to survive for as long as they can, until help arrives. Now, I think this is the weakest story of the bunch, and, you know, one thing that annoyed me, and I mentioned this in my full-length review, is that there is some shameless product placement in this film for Snickers candy bars, because the candy bar they're fighting over is a Snickers, you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's a little cheesy, a little goofy, silly. But I still thought this was a watchable segment. You know, the fear of being trapped on a mountain ledge is relatable. You know what I mean? Even if you haven't experienced it before, you can relate to it because you can imagine it. You know what I mean? And there are a few twists that helped to hold interest. So I did kind of like Cliff, but it's the weakest of this anthology and arguably the weakest of the entire Horror Stories franchise in terms of the short films that are included within them. Now, the second standalone story is called The Pain of Death, also known as Accident. Now, three young women fail their teacher certification examination, so, you know, they want to cheer themselves up, so they set out on a road trip into the mountains. All right, but unfortunately for them, a car accident soon turns their trip into a nightmare, and they experience strange phenomena in the desolate forest. Now, this is deliberately paced, but it's also moody and atmospheric, with a few spooky sets along the way. It's the kind of horror film that's right up my alley, and there's actually some chanting that is showcased in terms of sound effects, which I quite enjoyed. There are a few cool moments down the stretch as well, so I like this one. But I would say that the make or break segment of Horror Stories 2 is going to be the one that is going to divide the viewers the most. This third standalone story, which is called Escape. Now, this is a horror comedy about a student teacher who gets transported into an alternate dimension of his own apartment. And he then seeks advice via phone conversations with a beautiful goth chick and her roommates, all of whom are familiar with black magic, conveniently. So this story has a lot of energy to it. I really enjoyed it. So any possible pacing issues are immediately rectified in this. It moves very quickly. The lead actor does get a little bit whiny at times, I think, but the lead actress in this is freaking awesome. This segment is worth watching for Ji-won Kim's performance alone. She's great. She's hilarious and highly charismatic. But this is a very odd, whacked-out story that could rub some viewers the wrong way. I thought it was a lot of fun, though, because there are so many unusual moments in this one. I definitely appreciate that the filmmakers did something so different with the final standalone story in this anthology. So I really enjoyed Escape, and I think it really makes this anthology work. Worth watching. So Horror Stories 2 is available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles, but it's sporadic. Remember, when I said, I think I might have mentioned this either in my DVD update or my review of this film, that this was like not even available anywhere for like 6 months. And then it popped up on eBay, you know, the Region 3 legitimate release with English subtitles again. So this title goes through ebbs and flows. So if you want a blind buy, you might have to wait a little while, or maybe it's available now. So get on it. All right, we have 2 left tonight, and we're gonna country hop again to Thailand this time. All right, so this one's a pretty big one. Previously in this playlist, I reviewed over 50 horror movies from Thailand that were released from 1998 to 2012. And I plan on reviewing more of them as we continue with our exploration of Asian horror films in recent years. However, one thing I've noticed is that the overall entertainment value of Thai horror has dropped a bit during the first few years of the 2010s, in my opinion. You know, there have been some good ones, for sure, but I was not as impressed with their overall pool of horror films in the early 2010s. But that's going to change here, as you're going to see. We're going to start covering some pretty memorable Thai horror films, or while we cover, you know, the years of 2013 and subsequent. And the film we are covering tonight, as I said, is a big one. And that is P-Mach. This is a Thai horror comedy. Now, this is a comedic adaptation of the famous Maynok legend that spins the story in a number of fun ways. Basically, this takes place in the 19th century when a young man and his 4 friends return home from war to a ghostly wife who died while he was away. Now, unfortunately for him, he's the only one who thinks that she's still alive and not a ghost, meaning that his friends need to convince him otherwise and escape the area while avoiding the ghost's wrath. Now, this leads to a mix of spooks and laughs. So right from the start, I must point out that P-Mach was directed by the same men who gave us Shudder from 2004, Alone from 2007, Phobia from 2008, and Phobia 2 from 2009. So we know that we're in good hands here. We're in good hands, because all of those movies are pretty darn solid. Now, P-Mach is definitely a different beast for these directors, alright? But they certainly provide a high-energy experience with a lot of creative sequences to keep the viewer engaged. It blends genres quite nicely, I think. Now, before watching this film, I think you should definitely watch the film Nang Nak from 1999, or perhaps read up on the legend at least. You know, it will help you to appreciate the various jokes and plot twists much more in this film. They do some interesting stuff here, they do. But even if you're unfamiliar with the legend, there are still many jokes that you will understand. Like, for example, there's a haunted house attraction sequence that's quite amusing for anybody, regardless of whether or not you're familiar with this legend. Now, the second half is more entertaining than the first, in my opinion. It's one of those films that gets stronger as it moves along. Once you get to that aforementioned haunted house attraction sequence, it's very entertaining stuff for most of the latter half, and the lengthy finale is quite good as well. This is also nicely shot with some atmospheric, desolate locations. Now, P-Mach was a huge hit in its home country, and it gets consistently positive ratings online. But why is this in part 3 of this video instead of parts 4 or 5, where my favorite horror films from 2013 are going to be presented? Well, the humor was frequently chuckle-worthy, but I did not find it especially hilarious, and it relies a lot on the humor here. Now, it's a mix of witty jokes and silly gags, which means that the characters do get a little bit annoying at times and a little whiny. So the humor in this worked for me, but it didn't work in a high enough level to make it like one of my favorite films of 2013 on the Asian horror front. There's actually a different Thai horror film from 2013 that I liked a little bit more than this, and that will make an appearance in part 4 of this video. But I do recommend P-Mach. If you're at all interested in Thai horror films, this is kind of a must-see because it was a big one from recent years. Now, P-Mach is available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles. And our final film tonight is another Japanese found footage anthology. And that is Yami Douga 6, also known as Tokyo Videos of Horror 6. This is from 2013. Now, this is an anthology of 5 short horror films with a total runtime of 65 minutes. You should know the drill by now with this franchise, so let's rip through these short films briskly. The first story is called Experience Death. A woman is interviewed about a mysterious tree in her hometown. An overwhelming number of people hang themselves on that tree without any specific reason. The woman shows a series of videos that are recorded by a young man who investigated that tree on numerous nights. This is pretty creepy stuff, with one particularly well-executed hanging stunt, too. It really looked like the person hung themselves, you know what I mean? Second story is called A Passer. At the recreation facility of a company, a family is having a good time. Then an inexplicable entity appears. Now, soon after, it's learned that this facility was used as a sanitarium. This is simplistic and fairly short, but reasonably effective. Third story is called Ruining the Atmosphere. Now, this is a documentary video that records a healing seminar for women who are emotionally hurt, but an unexpected tragedy is waiting at the seminar venue. So this is a bit of a slow burn that has an unnerving and surprisingly violent finale that I enjoyed. Fourth story is called Old Girl. At the venue of a wedding party of a friend, a strange girl was caught by the camera. Similar to the second story, simplistic and short, but decent enough. And then we have the final story, which is called Spelled Zone. So 4 university students visit an abandoned hospital parking garage that is known to be haunted. And it's said that a certain ritual will make them see the spirits, but once the ritual begins, it must be completed correctly, or else bad things are going to happen. So this is one of the better segments because it's creepy right from the start, and it maintains that tension throughout. So I liked Yami Douga 6. I think it's my favorite of this franchise from this particular year. And that is available on YouTube with subtitles. I will include a link in the description box below. Alright. So we hammered through some stuff tonight. That concludes part 3 of our journey through Asian horror films released in 2013. We have 2 parts remaining from this year, and those 2 parts will essentially represent a top 15 list from this year. So be sure to join me for part 4, because we're going to crack into the bottom half of that top 15. We got some good stuff coming up. I tell people 2013 is a pretty solid year for Asian horror, and I think you're probably going to see that manifest in the next 2 videos. I mean, heck, the movies that we covered already. I mean, freaking P-Mock is a big one that a lot of people like more than me. Horror Stories 2 is definitely worth watching. It's a Beautiful Day. There's not a lot of really impactful Japanese slashers nowadays. That was a pretty good one. And even some of the other ones. Shackled, if you want something like weird and Lynchian. So there's a lot of stuff here that's worth watching, I think. Even in my last video, Arcana's an interesting flick. And The Crone is good, cheesy fun. So I'm telling you, there's a lot of memorable stuff from this year. So, again, join me in my next video. And until then, I'll see you next time.